Hey everyone, Dr. Frunkey here with an awesome new knife consult for you. This is the Sergey Rogevets FMJ, and this is the last in a series of videos on Sergey Rogevets knives, thanks to my good buddy Josh Zinn, who has sent his collection of Sergey knives to me. I've been very thankful to get to experience these. Sergey Rogevets is a maker that was relatively unknown to me before I got to handle some of these knives. Some of his knives are a bit strange, like this Vulture. You can go back and check out this video. Some of his knives are a bit crazy, like this 10-ounce Rhino right here with its 1/4-inch thick blade. But then he also makes some knives that are a little bit more practical, like the Object 113 that I previously featured. And then this knife. This is the FMJ. I saved this one for last because this one may be my favorite overall of the four, simply because of its overall usability and its sort of objective. Each one of those knives that I just showed you had a bit of an idea behind it and a goal. Sergey always builds a knife with a goal in mind. This one was meant to be his tactical folder. He said that he saw some elements in the tactical folding knife market that he didn't think were quite perfect, and he thought he could do his own interpretation here, and he has succeeded wildly. And so I wanted to talk about this, show off some of the features, and talk about Sergey a little bit more. So before we get too much further into our video, we're going to get some specs. This knife is coming in with a 3.75-inch overall blade length. Let me see if I can get that lined up better. Maybe more like a actually it's 3.5 inches now that I've got it lined up the right way. With an 8.5-inch overall length, you're looking at a 5-inch handle with an effective grip area of 4.5 inches right there. All of his knives come with these thick slabs of titanium and some rather thick blade stock. So the handle's coming in at 560 thousandths, or over 1/2 inch. And the blade stock is 168 thousandths right there. This, again, is meant to be his tactical folder, so you can see it's got that tanto grind and that sort of forward and sort of aggressive pointing tip right there. So let's go ahead and break this knife down anatomically and see what we're working with. Like I mentioned, that blade is done in a tanto grind. This has a belt satin finish on the primary bevels and then a horizontal hand satin done on the flats. It's actually quite nice. His edges are incredible. This is the factory edge on this knife. Every single one of these knives came with a mirror polished edge. This guy really knows what he's doing when he's making his knives, and he is not messing around. He only sends out the most beautifully finished knife every single time. There are no imperfections in the satins anywhere. This knife has been carried and used a little bit, so forgive any small marks or anything, but that is not from the factory. This is a really, really nicely functional blade shape. I like the way that this tanto tip is oriented, so you could get some nice push cutting in that way. You're going to be able to utilize the tanto tip, and it is a thick and strong tip, so you don't have to worry too much about breaking it off. I really enjoy this tanto shape. I think that it's very, very, very functional. The top of the blade is left relatively unfinished, but it's not sharp. There's a small chamfer here on the edge right there, so it's not overly sharp. The deployment mechanism, as you can see, is a small sort of oblong hole right there. It works best, in my opinion, for a Spidey flick, which is my personal favorite deployment mechanism, but you can get your thumb in there enough to deploy it with a thumb flick very, very easily, or the standard traditional thumb opening like that. So I really, really enjoy that. I think that more knives should be utilizing that. I appreciate that Sergey recognizes that as something that he wants on his ideal tactical folder. Another thing I like about this blade is the thumb ramp going on right here. This adds to the sort of tactical nature in that it's going to keep your thumb from sliding forward as you move forward with the knife. There's a nice finger guard going on right here. He's got a nice sharpening choil, and the blade is sharpened all the way back to the heel. Quite a nice blade. This one is maybe running on M390, possibly S90. Sergey only uses very high-end steels. It's sometimes designated on the inside there. It's not on this particular model. Something I realized that I didn't do a few minutes ago was do a size comparison. This is a fairly large knife, so I'm going to bring out a Spyderco Paramilitary 2 and a Para 3. As you can see, this knife is even bigger than the Paramilitary 2, so I'll bring out the obligatory large knife right here, the Benchmade Crooked River. And just for fun, I'll bring out another sort of high-end knife that's a good size reference. the Koenig Arius. It's more or less exactly the same size and dimensions as a Koenig Arius, save for the weight. I did not weigh this guy for you either, so I'm going to bust that out while I'm thinking about it. Throw this on the scale. None of these knives are particularly light. This one is coming in at a robust 7 ounces in overall weight. Sergey certainly likes to have his knives feel very solid, as well as look very solid. So you're going to feel that when you have it. Speaking of solid, let's talk about the pivot here. The pivot is very, very smooth, as is standard on all of his knives. It runs on ball bearings. Something that I've noticed is that he uses ceramic ball bearings. Sometimes he'll have phosphor bronze cages, sometimes they're steel cages, but all of the actions are very, very smooth. As you can see, it's quite easy to deploy. The blade falls down into the handle quite well. The detent is tuned perfectly on each one of these knives. Something that I need to emphasize on this again is that Sergey does all of this by hand. Nothing about this knife was created by a machine, at least in terms of CNC. What he does is he draws out a design on a piece of paper, and then he goes and he cuts all the metal out and he hand makes it all. There's a ton of hand finishing going on in this knife, and I like to talk about it when it comes to the pivots. I've done this on each of the other videos, but as I've shown on those, the pivots all look a bit similar, but if you look at each of them here, you'll notice that they're slightly different. Each one has a slightly different ring pattern, and that's because he actually hand turns each one of these pivots on a lathe for each individual knife. And so there is an extreme amount of custom work that goes into this that I don't see on on a lot of different custom knife makers, or so-called custom knife makers. The sort of ubiquity of the CNC and these pre-made pieces makes some people able to produce knives at a very high rate, with some sort of machine-produced parts. But again, Sergey is doing this all by hand, and so that's really what makes these knives so special. A lot of these knives are going to cost upwards of $1,000, so it's important to understand why that is and why these are so special. The hand making and the precision that he achieves is really unlike anyone else. You know, I'll show you right here. This is a Timascus pivot collar and then the hardened D2 steel lock bar insert. Just look at the precision here. This thing is completely handmade and just super tight everywhere. There's really no gaps. The finish work is all spectacular. Look at the chamfered edge in the stop pin hole right there. It's shining. It's just everything. There is detail, and it is all perfectly done. This really is a testament to his history as a jeweler, that everything is perfectly, perfectly done. I'll show you a better example of that here in a second at the end of the handle. Speaking of the handle, there are these nice thick slabs of 6AL4V titanium. He does a very, very nice user orange peel finish on a lot of his knives. This is a deep orange peel right here. It's going to hide wear extremely well. He's also done that on this milled 3D titanium clip. His clips, even though they're 3D milled, they all have enough spring, enough ramp, and enough height to function quite well. He's also kept the clip tip area away from the lock bar cutout so it doesn't snag too badly on the pants right there. Speaking of the lock bar does have a bit of a high release tension, and that is standard across all of his knives, but that is not so much of a problem as long as you are aware of it. The lock bar is raised relative to the show side, so it is easy to disengage that lock a little bit. So I was talking about sort of his precision and attention to detail as a jeweler. I'm going to clean off this backspacer and just show you what I'm talking about. Look at the Timascus on this backspacer right here. He has finished this with a very, very high polish and a very consistent flame treatment, and it's absolutely beautiful. This is really unlike a lot of other people in the industry where he gets a perfect consistency and a perfect polish. Some guys do this very well, but he really does this to a jeweler's precision right here. All these different facets look really nice. How is this knife in the hand? It's really, really nice, super ergonomic. The contouring of the handles are great in the hand. The thumb ramp and the full forefinger grip are ideal. This is probably my favorite of the four just because of the comfort in hand. the carryability, and the overall blade shape. I think that he's executed his idea of a tactical knife beautifully right here. Well, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Go ahead and click like and subscribe to my YouTube channel here. Head over to Instagram and check me out as Dr. Frunkey. Check out Sergey at Extreme Addiction on Instagram and extremeaddiction.com. And as always,